A small float plane flies over wetlands.
Okay, they are angling towards shore here, so it looks good.
Text, Inoko National Wildlife Refuge, 63 degrees north 158 degrees west.
Yeah, they're going to shore almost. Oh, they're dedicated now.
The view from the window of the float plane shows it landing in water.
You better get in there with that short lead. No, the lead birds are going in the pot. We're doing this right. It's nice and gentle. I'm going to come straight to shore off your right wing, Jordan. Yeah, I'm shut down.
The float plane touches down in the water. From the front of the plane, it coasts to the grassy shore.
We touch, go ahead.
Feet wearing boots squish through mud. A close-up shows greater white-fronted geese in a catch pen. Then a man hands a greater white-fronted goose to a woman. In fast motion, people bring geese from the catch pen to a bending crew. Then geese fly overhead at sunset. A flock of hundreds of geese flies over a meadow.
The mystery of bird migration has always been a source of fascination.
A biologist examines a metal leg band on a goose.
By marking birds in one location and recovering them in another, the mystery of migration can be solved. But first, you've got to catch the birds.
815.
Oh, I heard numbers. I started writing down. Who just said the last band number?
Title, Not Their First Rodeo. A historical photograph shows two men banding ducks.
For over a century, attaching leg bands to migratory birds has unlocked countless mysteries of bird movement and abundance.
Writing appears on a metal leg band with an identification number. Text, Write, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, 20708 USA.
This information, coupled with the ecological knowledge of residents from northern communities, has ensured long-term stability of birds that are important to culture and traditions.
An animation is superimposed over geese in flight. It shows birds moving on a map from the southern U.S. states to northern Canada and Alaska. The view from the window of a float plane shows it taxiing in water.
One of the hundreds of banding sites in North America is Alaska's Inoko National Wildlife Refuge, where a roundup of greater white-fronted geese takes place each summer.
From the back seat of the aircraft, a pilot and passenger sit in front.
I've been doing the white-fronted goose banding work since 2003. That was my first trip, so a little over 20 years. My name's Heather Wilson.
33, adult male.
Heather sits on the ground and bands a goose.
I'm a biologist pilot for Fish and Wildlife Service, and I work for a division called Migratory Bird Management that specializes in bird surveys.
Heather speaks to us while standing in front of the parked aircraft. Then the underside of the aircraft wing appears while it's in flight. Geese walk next to a net towards the water.
In mid-July, tens of thousands of greater white-fronted geese arrive to molt their worn flight feathers and begin rapid growth of new ones.
A group of Canada geese and greater white-fronted geese clusters in a pen.
We're trying to optimize a period where their feathers are not too small and we might cause damage, and not too big and they're going to fly away.
A person hands a goose to someone else.
So there's kind of a 10-day window in there that we're trying to hit.
A log cabin stands in the woods.
This banding operation is based out of a remote field camp located over 50 miles from the nearest village and accessible only by float plane.
A man looks out from the shore with his hands in his pockets. A float plane stands near him in the water. A plane hovers in the air over the wetlands.
From the field camp, float planes transport the banding crew to nearby lakes to set up capture nets.
A man gestures behind him on the lake shore. Text, Julian Fisher, Supervisory Wildlife Biologist, Migratory Bird Management, USFWS.
Okay, so when the geese hit these feed lines, they start funneling towards habitat that they see as safe. They can't get through these nets, so they keep kind of moving forward along the V until they see what they think is a way to escape, which actually is the trap. So we'll see how it works out.
A float plane takes off from the water.
When the nets are in place, the crew loads back into float planes, and the drive begins.
Brad Scotton, Supervisory Wildlife Biologist / Pilot, Kayakuknawitna Inoko National Wildlife Refuge, speaks from the shore.
Specifically for this, I fly the smallest of the planes that we use, and it's coordinating aircraft basically in the air, so I spend most of my time in the air circling fairly low and slow over the other 3 aircraft that are on the water, taxiing and pushing the bird.
Float planes taxi in front of a flock.
I can see from above the perspective that they can't see from the ground, so it helps herd them, because essentially we're herding them into what from the ground looks like a very large trap, but from the air it really isn't very big compared to all of the alternatives that the birds have.
From the space between a wing strut, a distant float plane in flight comes into focus.
Yeah, Brad Scotton. I'm the supervisory wildlife biologist and pilot for the Kayakuk-Nowitna National Wildlife Refuge. I think I've done it 18 times, possibly 19.
As a float plane taxis, we move in the water toward a flock. Then a large flock of geese walks out of the water onto land. A man walks behind the flock as they enter the catch net. The flock of geese is inside the catch pen.
Once in the net, the banding process begins. The crew organizes into various roles: geese wranglers, banders, and data recorders. First, we're gauging them based on the amount of flecking on the belly. There's very little here, so we're calling it a second year, meaning it was hatched last summer. Then we put on a band.
A man lifts a goose from the catch pen. Another person bends a goose, while others record data.
This one's number 217740418.
A person bends a goose.
Dennis, 18, second year, male.
Once a bird is captured inside the net pen, to be released into the lake is most of the time, certainly less than 2 minutes.
The crew continues to band the geese.
We turn them loose towards the lake so they get back in the water quickly.
Geese are released toward the lake and they race into the water.
That's the safest place for them. Then once they're in the water, they get to cool off and calm down and swim away and get back together with the rest of the birds.
The geese swim far from the shore. Then the crew moves in fast motion, continuing to band multiple geese.
A well-coordinated crew can process a flock of 350 geese in about an hour and a half. It typically takes 2 to 3 days of hard work to complete the banding project.
Heather kneels in the grass and bands a goose.
Even though we're doing the same thing, there's always some sort of fresh component, and that's fun and rewarding personally.
After banding, the crew gathers around the plane.
In terms of the enjoyment factor, like the camaraderie that we have is really special.
From the float plane window, the wetlands are below and another float plane flies in the distance. Then the crew shares a laugh in the field camp cabin.
You're getting to see things that most people don't see, and when you do work together as a team, well, that's just like in any team, that's really satisfying and fun.
Brad Scotton speaks from the shore.
The component of this one that I actually enjoy the most is that it's a team effort.
The back image of the pilot appears in the cockpit.
A lot of the surveys I do are just me and one biologist in an airplane flying an aerial survey. So I get to work with other sort of like-minded biologists from different parts of the state who I've worked with for years.
The crew bends geese.
There's a camaraderie with getting a big project all done successfully and doing it as a team.
They take down the catch pen.
It's not, because if any one person messes up, the whole thing falls apart. So there's no hero, everybody works together to get something done.
A flock of geese huddles in a catch pen.
In Alaska, geese are a culturally important part of what sustains people who live from the land. So for this Alaskan banding crew, their work is rewarding, knowing they help ensure these geese remain plentiful into the future.
A float plane banks over a lake. Pairs of greater white-fronted geese fly over the water.
Soon the geese will head south on their fall migration.
A flock of geese moves from the water onto land.
But before long, a new set of birds will return.
Geese enter a net with float planes on land and water in the background.
There the banding crew will be waiting for them, welcoming them back with a fresh set of leg bands.
Gotta be patient. Appreciate the trees you're driving past. Gotta be patient.
Credits: Bending Crew, Nate Olson, Benjamin Fisher, Brad Scotton, Wade Shook, Jordan Murdoch, Tasha DiMarzio, Julian Fisher, Ben Coons, Heather Wilson, Jen Coons, Dennis Marks, Jim Whitcup, Terza Bryant, Michael Guttery, Sable Scotton. Additional footage courtesy of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Conservation Training Center, Creative Imagery. Tim Bowman, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Karen Bollinger, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Javon Bank, U.S. Geological Survey.
Gotta be patient.
Original score by Aaron Dawn.
Appreciate the trees you're driving past. Rain.
Created by Benjamin Fisher for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Gotta be patient.
Canada geese and greater white-fronted geese appear in